Okay, it's back to map progression. Do the problems on the assignment. The assignments are kind of short, about 4 problems usually is how many you have. And then after that, you hand me the assignment. I'll get you started on the next one. Okay, you're going to be solving some equations. You also have this kind of checklist thing that you need to get familiar with using, because with this stuff, and we got a lot more to cover on this standard. It's easily the hardest standard. You're going to want to get familiar with using this. So, we have negative 21x to the second power minus 35x equals 0. So what I need to do when I'm solving these equations, that means finding what the x variable equals, is to know how many answers we're trying to find. Well, due to the fact that the x is to the second power, there are 2 answers. Okay, then it says, what do I have for x's? So I'm going to go up, make this little kind of box up here. And I have the x to the second, and I also have the regular x. So if I have x to the second, regular x, I need to make sure the equation is equal to 0. So there it is right there. Definitely is equal to 0. Then I underline the big terms. Here there are only 2 of them, negative 21 and 35x. Now I want to count the terms. That's easy to do. You just count how many underlines you made. So I made 2 of them. So with 2 terms, the only thing we know how to do with 2 terms at this point in what we're doing is to make the GCF box. Okay. So I'm going to set that box up. GCF equals. Now, there's always 3 things you check for when doing the GCF. The first thing you check for is if you have a negative in front of the first number. I do, so I put a negative. Then I make sure I have x on all the lines, and I do. Okay, so we put x. Okay, then you can go to your GCF calculator and you can punch in, and you can use your phone or whatever for that, 21, 35. 21, 35, and it's going to say that it is 7, okay? So negative 7x. So I'm going to bring out negative 7x, okay? So don't show your work, transfer that out here, and then go up here and divide by your negative 7x. Now, one thing it's smart to do so you don't get confused is where you have the x over the x, I would cancel those. You can't cancel this, but you would want to cancel this. So negative 21 divided by negative 7 is 3, okay? And then x squared divided by x is x, so we need an x next to the 3. Negative 35 divided by negative 7 is positive 5, okay? So that's plus 5, and I don't need to put the x. Okay, so what I have done now is I've made this into 2 factors, okay? F1 and F2. Okay, so F1 is negative 7x. Set that equal to 0. And F2 is 3x plus 5. So negative 7 times x equals 0. Well, all you got to do is divide by negative 7, and x is 0. Okay, then I've got 3 times x, but there's a 5 being added, so I need to subtract 5 from both sides. So 3x equals negative 5, okay? I divide both sides of the equation by 3. And negative 5 divided by 3 is negative 1.6 repeating. You can also leave it as negative 5 over 3, but some of you are not very good with the fraction. You get confused with that, so I would just divide it. Okay, my next problem here. x to the second power minus 6 times x minus 55 equals 0. Put a 1 there. Okay, so how many answers are there? Well, again, the x is to the second power, so I know from that there are going to be 2 answers. Now, after I've done that, I want to see what I actually have for x's, if there's anything else besides the x to the second. Well, yeah, there is. I've got x to the second, and I've also got regular x. Okay, now again, due to the fact that we got those x second x, which are not like terms, we're going to have to factor the expression. Okay, we make sure we have our 0. It's right here. Then I underline the big guys. Then I count how many terms I have. But this time there's 1, 2, and 3. So instead of just making the GCF box with 2, we go to where there's 3, and we make a GCF box, and then we make the box to do the t-test. Okay, that's kind of a longer box where we split it in half, and there's my t. And again, I'm going to want this part for me to do my parentheses. Okay, so I make the GCF box. And then I make that kind of larger box, split it in half, and put the T chart, and A equals. Okay, so remember, this is to look for a greatest common factor. Now, do we have the negative in front? No, we don't. Do we have x on everything? No, we do not. Okay, if I go to my GCF calculator and punch in 1, 6, 55, the GCF calculator is just going to tell me it's 1. Okay, so since it's 1, let's not bother with that. That's going to be a wasted step. I'm not going to get anywhere. Okay, so now I go A, B, C, and I do my t-test. Remember how I do that? I always take the A multiplied by C. So A is positive 1, and C is negative 55. Okay, that's negative 55, and that's going to lead to me, when I get a negative, I'm going to look for a difference. The difference has to equal 6. 55 divided by 1 is 55, but 55 minus 1 is not 6. 55 divided by 2 is a decimal. 55 divided by 3 is a decimal. 55 divided by 4 is a decimal. And 55 divided by 5 is actually 11. 11 minus 5 is 6, so I have my 2 factors. Now put the signs on them. So if you look at that 6, the B term, it's negative. So what that means is my larger number, 11, needs to be negative. Okay, and if we were doing a difference, the signs are not going to be a match. They need to be a non-match, so it's plus. Plus 5 minus 11. Now, A here, A is equal to 1x squared. So if A is 1x squared, that's actually good, because then I can just make 2 parentheses. Because I know this times this had to equal 1x squared. Well, the only way that's possible is if you have x times x. Okay? And then plus 5 and minus 11. Okay, now that is now my F1 and F2, and now I can solve them. Okay, so x plus 5 can equal 0. X minus 11 can equal 0. Okay, so again, if you want to put the 1 as a coefficient, we got a 5 being added, so I subtract 5. And that's going to give me negative 5. So there's my first answer. Plus 11, 1x equals 11. Okay, and that's my second answer. Okay, next problem. 3x plus 4 equals 5x plus 10. How many answers does this one have? There's no second power here. There's no power at all, so there's just one answer, okay? So what do I have for x's? Well, go up here kind of on the side box. We don't have an x as second power. We have x only, okay? X only. So when we have x only, we don't want to be worried about this stuff. We need to look over here, only x. First, we collect x's on the same side. So pick one of the x's to get rid of. Let's pick the 3. So collect those on the same side. You could also do the 5 if you felt like it, okay? So now where does that leave me at in the equation? We got 4, 5 minus 3 is 2x, and then plus 10. Okay. Collect your non-x's on the opposite side of the equation. So there's my x term. Let's get the non-x's over here. So I would minus 10, drop my equals, and that's going to be negative 6. And then I get 2 times x. And then I divide. Pretty easy. But by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So there's my solution. X equals negative 3. Okay, that's pretty easy, pretty much a walk in the park. Okay. All right, next one. How many answers? Okay, the x is to the second power. So if x is to the second power, we know there are going to be 2 of them. Okay, now what do we have for x's? Okay, well, I've got the x to the second, but I've also got the regular x term. Okay. Okay, now, so you got x to the second and x. They're not like terms, so equals 0. Yep, you have it. Underline your big guys. And then count the terms. Basically, that means count how many lines you just made. You made 3. 1, 2, 3. You made 3, so we're going to look for a GCF. And then we're going to have to make our T-chart. We're going to want to know what A equals. Okay. Just basically copy that. That's all you have to do. Okay, so GCF. Do you have a negative in the front? Nope, so don't put a negative. Do you have X on every line? No, so don't put X. Okay, 1, 7, and 10. If you GCF calculator that, you will just get 1, so that does us no good. Okay, so now it's A, B, and C. So I take A times C. So I take positive 1 times positive 10. And this time, positive 1 times positive 10 is positive 10. Okay? So if I got a positive, I'm going to look for a sum that equals 7. It means you're going to add them to try to get to 7. Okay, so 10 divided by 1 is 10. Okay, but that 1 plus 10 isn't 7. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 2 plus 5 indeed is 7. Okay. Now we got to put the right signs on the 2 and the 5. Okay, so we had a plus 7 on the B. So you got to have a plus 5 for sure. Okay, plus 5. And it's a sum, so the signs have to match. So that'll also be plus 2. Okay. All right, now, again, A equals 1x squared, so that's good. That means you just can make 2 parentheses because you can break down 1x squared with just x times x, okay? So x, and then plus 2 and plus 5. Okay, and that becomes my F1 and F2. Okay, so I know that F1 is x plus 2. That can equal 0. I know that F2 is x plus 5. That can equal 0. Okay, so I'm minus 2, 1x equals negative 2. There's your first answer. minus 5, 1x equals negative 5. Okay, there's your second. Okay, next one. Negative 16x to the second power plus 32x equals 0. How many answers? We have an x to the second, so there's obviously going to be 2 answers. Okay, what do we have for x's here? Okay, again, we have x to the power of 2, but we also have regular x, so those x's are not like terms, so we need to tear it apart by factoring. Okay, so make sure we have our 0. We do. Underline your big guys here and here. Now count the terms. There's 2. Okay, you made 2 lines. There's 2 terms. 1, 2. So it's just the GCF, and then we should be ready to go and solve it with the F1, F2. Okay, so the greatest common factor. We do have a negative in front this time, so let's put negative. You do have x on both of them, so you need to put an x. Now you got to try to look for a number that goes between the negative sign and the x. So on your GCF calculator, you go 16, 32, and it's going to say it's 16, okay? So you need to show your work. You need to take that and put negative 16x right here. Then you also need to transfer and show that you're going to divide by negative 16x. Okay, now remember, the x over the x we just forget about, but we can't forget that. So I'd say negative 16 divided by negative 16 is 1. X to the second power divided by x, that's just x. 32, positive 32 divided by negative 16 is negative 2. We'll call that minus 2, okay, and then we're good. So I parenthesize that negative 16x that's there. Sorry, you can't see it very good. So that right there, that is going to be F1, and that is going to be F2. Okay, so F1 is negative 16x. F2, that's 1x minus 2. So box up your x terms. In this equation, the x is just multiplied by negative 16 to get 0, so we divide by negative 16. That gives me 0. Plus 2, 1x equals 2. There's your second. Okay, my next problem. How many answers are there? There are 2. Okay, what do we have for x's? We have a second powered x and just a regular x. So when I have those two things both, we go through our factoring procedure. Equals 0, we have that. Underline your big guys, so 1, 2, 3. Count your terms, okay? There's 3. So we're going to make a GCF box and then my T. Okay, GCF, do you have a negative on the front number? No. Do you have X on all your numbers? No, we don't really have that either, okay? And then if I punch in 1, 4, 12 into the GCF calculator, it's just going to say the greatest common factor is 1, so that means that gets me nowhere. So I take A times C, and that's going to be positive 1 multiplied by negative 12. Well, that gives me a negative. So since I got a negative, I'm looking for two factors that give me a difference of 4. 1 and 12. 12 minus 1 ain't 4. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. Okay, so I look at the sign that's on that B, the 4, it's negative or minus, so I know my 6 has to be minus. And difference means the signs cannot be a match, okay? And I know my A is 1x squared, okay? So since that's true, I can just break the 1x squared into two factors of x and x, okay? So plus 2 minus 6. Okay, so that's F1 and that's F2. So x plus 2, that equals 0. X minus 6, that equals 0. So minus 2, 1x equals negative 2. Plus 6, 1x equals 6. Okay, so those are my two answers, negative 2 and positive 6. Okay, my next one, 60x plus 30 equals 70x plus 45. Okay. All right, so how many answers? Well, there's one. There's only going to be one answer. What do we have for x's? Well, it appears to me like there is no second powered x. It's x only, okay? So with the x only, we don't want to do all this nonsense, okay? If it's only x, you want to collect x's on the same side of the equation, okay? So pick one of these. Let's pick the 70. I'll minus 70x minus 70x. So that's, where's that set me? That gives me a negative 10x plus 30. And over here I get a 45. Okay, now collect your non-x's on the opposite side. So here are my two non-x's, 30 and 45. Let's get those on the other side. Okay, so I have negative 10x, and 45 minus 30 is 15. Okay, and then it's time to divide. We just divide by the negative 10 coefficient, and 15 divided by negative 10 is negative 1.5. Okay, and then the last example. X to the second power plus 12x plus 32 equals 0. So how many answers? There's a second power there, means there's 2. What do we have for x's? Well, again, I've got the second powered x, but I've also got the regular x in the equation, so those aren't not like terms, okay? So when I got those two things, I make sure I have my 0, got it. I underline my big guys. And then I count my terms. Well, there are 3, so I'm going to check for a GCF. And I know that GCF sounds really pointless, but you're going to be glad you're doing it when we get to that, okay? And then my T box. Okay, so GCF. I most definitely don't have the negative. I do not have x on everything, and if I punch in 1, 12, and 32, it's just going to give me 1, okay? Out. Okay, again, I take A times C, and I'm going to keep writing that so you remember. Positive 1 times positive 32, that gives me positive 32. So it's positive. I'm looking for a sum that is going to equal the 12. 32 divided by 1 is 32. However, 1 plus 32 is not 12. 32 divided by 2 is 16. However, 2 plus 16 is not 12. 32 divided by 3 is a decimal. 32 divided by 4 equals 8, and that's 12. Got it. Okay, so my 12 is plus, so that means the 8's plus for sure, plus 8. And a sum means the signs need to match, so plus 4. Okay, so A again, A we know is just 1x squared, so that's good. That means I can just break it up. So x plus 4 plus 8, and that's my factor number 1. That's my factor number 2. So factor number 1, F1, that's x plus 4 can equal 0. Factor number 2, x plus 8, that could equal 0. So minus 4, 1x equals negative 4. Minus 8, 1x equals negative 8. So those are the answers. Okay, you have 4 problems.